All right, so we have Jim and Chelsea who have just joined us. I've just put into the chat window the link to the Lean Coffee Table. So we can start gathering topics. So when you get there, join up and start adding topics. I see we've already got a few up in here already. Great. What's on our minds? What's on your mind today that you would like to cover? What's your team working through? I'm really curious what red teaming is.
Oh, red teaming. Yeah, it's good stuff. Acting like the enemy. There's a book by Micah Zenko, and you can also find podcasts, etc. I can share a slide.
Wow.
This is more to do with the Bryce Hoffman. I don't know if you're aware of Bryce Hoffman. He's the first non-military to go through the Fort Leavenworth. And it's about how you stress test strategies, you think the unthinkable. And so it's a way of laterally thinking. And there are certain ceremonies, I think, within red teaming that would transition nicely into project management. So, for example,
absolutely.
the pre-mortem.
Yeah. Well, that would be great. I look forward to that topic. Good, we're seeing.
Cast your votes now.
I'd say let's start casting votes. I know we're about 5 minutes into the start of the meeting, so that's certainly good enough for me. People can join and vote as they join. We often have more topics than we really get to in an hour anyway, so all the better. Let's just start the ball rolling. We get maybe a minute or two extra to be able to chat about some of these. So go ahead and vote. So everyone gets 3 votes. So put your votes in for the topic you are looking for. You would like most to speak about or talk about. And if people have any questions on the topics, on what things mean, just speak up and we'll ask for clarity. How's everyone doing on voting? Still a couple folks, me included, need to vote, and I am a blank check. All of these are great. Great. Has everyone gone through? Yep, we've gotten most everything. Abe, Captain Marvel. Great. All right. Well, let's start our discussion. All right. So Lean Coffee Table has looked at those. We have a couple that have 4 votes. Forecasting roadmaps when in the Agile world and building a design system in Agile were the top 2. So let's talk about forecasting roadmaps when in the Agile world. And I'll start us with 5 minutes. I know we often go beyond it, but let's just kind of go with that pattern. Let's start with 5. So forecasting roadmaps when in the Agile world. Who wrote this, and specifically what were you looking for? What were some of your challenges?
I wrote it. I'm not having a personal challenge, but we're having a team challenge with it. I think we're in a place where we don't really know how we're going to accomplish things that are down the road, and trying to write that down and how to communicate that up to other folks is something that we're working on. One of the things that I'm kind of resigned to, and I'm okay with it, is I have good clarity about what's coming up over the next month, next 2 months. After that, it gets a little fuzzier, and then anything beyond that, I have no clue. I know what the things are on kind of in the hopper, and we can figure out a sequencing of them, but actually like assigning them dates, we can take guesses, but trying to find ways to make sure that is clear and fits with organizational needs.
Mm-hmm. So I'll ask is that what you described to me sounded like a pretty standard, if not ideal or close to ideal situation, that you do know more about the things that are coming up soon, and things that are further down the road you know less about, which allows you to adapt based on what happens in the more near future. I know that's hard for management, for people in a more traditional world where they want to know, they have full clarity on everything from day one to day 1,000, but that it reflects more the realism of what most projects are like.
Yeah. So,
Comment?
I mean, it's a matter of getting their mindset changed, because look, I can make something up, but would you rather have a piece of fiction, or would you rather have a knowledge of what we'd like, but all the uncertainty around it? So one of the things I used to do as product manager was to stop giving people dates when I was going to deliver stuff. I would say, look, here's what we plan to build, and here is the error bar around it. Here's the best case if everything goes swimmingly. Here's the worst case if things really go off the rails, and here's the expected case. So the expected case, we're reasonably likely to hit that. If we do better than that, here's what I'll bring in to use the time, or maybe we release early. Here is what we'll do in the worst case. Here's what I would cut first, et cetera, or how I would try to make up. But at least giving them that first dose of uncertainty that you can't really know this stuff. It's not possible. Therefore, kind of showing a cone of uncertainty as you move out. Of course, as you get closer to delivery, the uncertainty goes down, and so you can tighten up the estimates, tighten up the error bar, but still keeping clear in their minds that we really don't know this stuff, can't know it.
Yeah,
And
the problem is when the customer is a government bureaucracy.
Yep.
Who's paying the bills.
There you go.
They have to live in reality too.
Yeah.
I think also it depends on the knowledge of the project that you're being asked to develop. So has the team had prior experiences, or is this a new technology? And particularly if there are sort of legacy integration issues or other complexities in terms of the kind of user interface, has that been clearly defined? But one thing I would suggest is maybe having a periodic meeting with the project sponsors and the senior leadership to identify where these Horizon Epic projects fit in, because obviously business cases change, priorities change, and to a certain extent that's beyond your control as the sort of project team. It's more when the Epic project becomes more defined into a more cohesive set of stories that you can then accurately forecast the delivery, and then sort of picking up on Jim's point, give them a more accurate forecast of delivery.
One other thing I'd throw in is decide early on which of your constraints are immutable. Is the schedule the most important thing? Do you need to hit a trade show or a certain market opportunity, et cetera, and you trim the feature set? Or is it having the complete feature set more important? You really can't do much by adjusting your team size or resources. That only makes you later if you throw them on late. And then quality, well, we usually don't want to mess up that one. So really, it's usually just those two variables.
And our first voting option to extend or end the topic. So please, everyone, put your votes in on what you prefer. All right, it looks like we have an extend, so I'll give it another 5 minutes, although I'll bet we'll maybe wrapping up sooner.
I voted extend because I think this is an interesting question.
Yeah.
Knowing, so you and I know a little bit about this project too. We know that when we first saw it, it's like 1,750 days. We're not even talking about 1,000 days of planning ahead. It's 5 years. Right. It's government funded with a big budget with a waterfall mindset. We want to deliver in an agile in a manner in order to deliver, make sure we deliver value in this time frame, just even in how we run the team.
So what
And
is
it's
the
like,
contract?
how do you solve both problems? I think when you write a story, you have two very different thoughts as to what does it mean to minimally implement that story and to maximally implement that story. If you're going to waterfall it with the government, you have to think minimal viable story and not allow, you have to manage stories somehow differently than you would before. Mike?
No, I was just asking, so what's the, by the contract or the grant or whatever, what's the end deliverable? How is it stated? How's it characterized?
So I can jump in on that. The end deliverable is 10 separate different technology products that we're going to be developing. And within that, we have certain milestones that we have to hit. Like every 3 months, we have a deliverable that needs to be achieved. And it's measured by WBS elements, which is just a code, but it's parent and child relationships. But one piece of clarification for this question, because I know where Hassan is going with it, is that we've done a little bit better of adjusting expectations at our organization to say these are just guesstimates. But I think what we've struggled with is providing a level of transparency that people think that we have these plans set 3 months in advance, 5 months in advance, 6 months in advance. We've struggled with that piece, considering that the roadmap and the items on the roadmap keep changing every time we meet to discuss it. So it's really hard for us to say, this quarter we're working on these elements, but then unplanned work comes up and that quarter is just gone.
Yeah,
So
well, that's part, where I was going with the question is that, and this is, obviously you're not going to help with this one, but certainly in the future, if you have the result in the form of some kind of KPI or outcome that's separated from like the technology or the product or whatever, then it's less, you're then predicting, and checking as you go, are we making the movement in whatever that outcome is, as opposed to the output, which is just the technology or the things that, are going to get the second order, result. Because once you specify specific things to be produced, well, you got to produce the specific things, which then goes to Tom's point about, okay, well, what's the minimum expectation for that thing? And if we exceed it, great, but then you're back to having huge amounts of contingency that you have to factor in for unexpected developments, particularly if it's new technology and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah, like stories should be outcomes. It's the whole new focus of Scrum is very outcome oriented, even for the sprint goal.
Right.
That you manage towards that outcome. And of course, the other thing for this project is, as much as possible, you should be doing continuous integration / deployment / automated testing, or you're just going to get buried in the project, right? The technology framework just becomes essential for something running this long.
Absolutely.
There's a key word you just mentioned, which was project, and having a project mentality versus a product mentality can get you down the wrong path too. The idea that, oh, we're going to build this thing, we're going to develop it out to here, it'll be done, over.
They already know that. They maintain this as a long-term service, so they already live that.
Okay.
That's part of where their other requests are coming in all the time.
That's part of the challenge with this too, is like we talk about the 10 products that it's going to deliver, but the real thing that it's delivering is the foundation that can be used for products 12 through 20 and reused that way. And that's not the way that the work breakdown structure is set up. So it's like we're trying to move two directions at the same time. One that's being measured and one that's kind of the subtext.
Yep. Time again already.
So put your votes in on whether we should extend or end the topic, or no preference.
No, for goodness sakes.
What is this? 222? Oh, we still have a little bit on an extend. All right, I'm going to give it 2 more minutes
That's good.
to close up. We had some closing
The only
thoughts.
thing I would add, Sam, when you mentioned about sometimes there's sort of interference, I mean, could some form of a change control board help to referee the situation between the key elements of the deliverables for the project and the noise or chaos that is really something else that another team could look at as a way to help focus on the importance of the deliverables of the project?
I second that.
Yeah,
That
I
should
like
have been
that
the
idea
first, that
because
should have been the first thing we said.
yeah.
That's why we needed 2 more minutes. How's it going?
puts
Do you
the
have one?
onus on decision making on that group as opposed to you, right? Right now, all the bricks are falling on your head. You need those senior stakeholders to take the responsibility off of you for that.
To have a change control board
Yeah.
meeting.
And this is where I'd like to also second, I think it was Jim's suggestion about regular meetings with your senior stakeholders, senior management, sponsors. I've had really good success in the past with projects that are structured that way, whether they're agile or waterfall, but just as both Tom and Mike were saying, it's you're bubbling up to them these big decision points on, are we taking resources away from the current project to work on these interrupts, or are we going to focus on the project as we had planned for the in the product delivery, because it's got to come out of being constantly pushed down to the team to just do everything.
You can have anything you want. You just can't have everything you want.
Right. And I've had best
found
luck in getting management to take that role is with those regular meetings, so that they know that's what we're there for. We're bringing things to you as a steering committee or change control board, so that they make the decision, not just by de facto.
I mean, in the past, I've found a clarification conversation more revealing, because sometimes somebody will put something in writing, but it's not actually what they really mean, or you can't read the emphasis in a written statement. Whereas if you've got a face-to-face conversation with somebody, well, it's not really what I meant. Oh yeah, well, we can negotiate. Yes, that's not a priority. So sometimes that conversation can be quite revealing and will help in what the priorities are.
Very good. Absolutely. All right, next vote. Continue, extend, no preference. And I think we should, at this point, thank you, end the topic. Good discussion, though.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful final comment, Nigel. Worth the extra 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm surprised Helene didn't say that, because she loves to create change control boards.
Well, I know, and I love that Jim had mentioned it early. So this was great. Good topics. All right.
Next
That'll
topic.
be my new handle, change control.
There you go. Building a design system in Agile.
Yeah, Nigel, just on that point, just make sure you type in CCB and not CCP, okay?
Right, a board versus a process. All right.
No, it
I
meant something
presume?
else. Believe me.
Oh, okay. Building
What
a
does this
design
one
system
mean?
in Agile. What was meant by building a design system in Agile?
So I was the one who wrote this. So the design system is something that designers currently need in order to implement standardized practices and assets across a technology stack, which for our organization, we have quite a number of different products that we build, and they all look and feel differently, operate differently, and we're trying to standardize that. So the designers that we're working with has said, one thing that we need to put in place is this design system. And they told me it would take between 6 to 8 months to be developed. And in an agile framework like ours, where we have to deliver every 2 weeks and we have deliverables that need to be done with before the 6 to 8 month period, how do we consolidate those two things? Can a design system be built in an agile way? Or does it have to be purely waterfall, big bang at the end of the 6 to 8 month period?
Yes, you can build it in an agile way. That's what we did at Menlo 2 decades ago. The system itself can consist at its core of a small number of ceremonies that you run in that system on a cadence, the same sprint cadence as you run the rest of the teams. And it's like, why would you build one? We can build one with you. You can go down Menlo and steal theirs, take their training. It's like anything where they're like, we want to build a system for 8 months should be a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like there are a relatively small number of core ceremonies you need to really get things going for good design. And yeah, take it in an agile manner. Jim.
It's going to be evolutionary anyway. You're going to discover commonalities between the different modules, and you're going to discover where they diverge and where you have to make special cases, etc. And that's going to continue as new functionality gets implemented in the different things. So think of it as a constantly evolving set of guidelines. So an agile approach seems the best way to go about it, because you got to discover along the way anyway.
Menlo now has, when I asked, they have about 18 ceremonies that they sort of recognize, right? So, Scrum is like 3 events or whatever. So everything from, and some of which we've talked about in the past, and some we've done with you, story mapping, we consider a design ceremony. Persona development, persona mapping,
Paper prototyping,
observations, interviews, but with a heavy emphasis on observations. If you can make it, it's easier now sometimes to make it happen with tech and with everyone working remotely. You can get them to share their screen and you can sort of watch them work. Yeah.
Have you thought about wireframing as well? Because that's quite a good way to sort of sketch out, to show what the UI will look like and where the calls for the population of those different fields come from.
Yeah, all of that.
Okay, and you mentioned that you did it at Menlo with a series of ceremonies. Can you talk a little bit about those ceremonies real quick?
Yeah, I mean, the big ones that most stand out for me is they'll do some sort of paper prototype or wireframe. That's creating a deliverable. The ceremony is then a cognitive walkthrough, where once you've created that, you sit down with a test subject, almost always a new one. You give them a goal and you observe, you ask them to speak out loud what they're thinking. You don't tell them anything, and you observe how they're going to interact. That would be like a ceremony that we would do. Another key ceremony that we would do in design in the early days is just an observation ceremony, which is really strange. You ask if someone's working in a task, or you're trying to build something for a task they're currently doing, or they're using an existing system. We would typically do 3. We're like, we'd like to see somebody who's doing it manually, one with another system and one with our system. And you just observe them. So you create a set of ceremonies that you know what you're expecting of yourself.
Yeah, fundamentally
Often-
treat the infrastructure development as a product, not just a project. Go ahead, Helene. Thumbs up.
A voting, just letting folks know it's our next to vote to extend or end. I'm seeing an extension. Okay, 5 more minutes. Sorry, Mike, go ahead. And I'm going to go
No,
look for something while we're talking about this. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, that was it. It was, a lot of times part of the problem with the infrastructure stuff is it's treated as some kind of hidden system, and the gals go off and they develop stuff in this vacuum. But if it's going to be a common infrastructure, then treat it as a product and just use the same methods you're using on all the other things, right? The things that Tom is talking about, and just any of those other approaches, as well as the same kind of CCB that Nigel brought up, all those techniques, because it's still an investment. It's still, something that there's an 80-20 probably there, and you're going to make discoveries about what's really needed and what's not needed, as opposed to just saying, I'm going to deliver this monolith. I mean, database and system infrastructure people are notorious for, it's all got to be all or nothing. And even though it's 80-20, you know, we don't need all of it. Yes, Elaine.
Excellent. So for some of those ceremonies and some of those ideas, IDEO cards. Remember the IDEO video that we watched during our training, Abe? All those different techniques for going out and gathering information from your customers. These are all design techniques, right? These cards come in with all the various things, like there it is, personal inventory. It's part of a look activity. So there's a whole deck of these cards that are available that could help your designers come up with what are some of the things, the tools we can use that can get us information from our customers. I mean, this is what IDEO does, right? And they're, you know, all of the techniques are along these kind of 4 lines: look, learn, ask, and try. I've used these in sessions with teams as well, as we would write stories, working with designers on how would you go about testing some of these? How would you go about determining which approach you would like to take on developing, like, your new product, a new system? And these cards have been really helpful, right? And even just literally dealing out the deck and letting people just pick a few. 52 can be overwhelming on these cards, but just start picking out some. But that's the concept of, you know, helping your designers come up with different ways, right? And ceremonies, ceremonialize. All of these things are basic ceremonies. Run them through a sprint. Work with real end users, real potential end users. And that can all be done in an agile fashion.
One of the best things I heard in this session was to think about the design system as a product in itself, as opposed to something that supplements the product. So go through the same design process, same sprint process, same story writing. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense here. The challenge is, well, it's not even a challenge. In many cases, those would be our internal and external users, so we can at least start with those. Because the design system will have reusable elements, and we have people who are currently using some of those elements now, so we can get feedback on that. So I think that's the price of entrance right there. I like that.
Just a quick comment. Tom casually tossed out, oh yeah, make sure you try it on new users. New users who have never seen your product are an extremely valuable resource, and they're hard to get. So be mindful about which things you want them to look at that are going to do it, because then you got to go round up more new users for the next time you spring something on somebody who's never seen it. It can be a real challenge. So be mindful of which tests you want to run on new users.
As we developed this system a couple decades ago, and really the designers developed the system. We didn't develop it for them. They also got really good at time boxing themselves. They knew that any given task they want on, they could do forever. So they would say, let's do this task. As they began to task out their work, they story carded their design work, just like you story card development work. They would plan it, iterate on it, do it, and they'd say, oh, I'll do 4 hours of work on this, as a way to constrain themselves and bring them back to the group to demo, show and tell, whatever they were going to do, and move forward. And that's another technique that's really helped keep them flowing with the team, because you can design forever.
And you may go too far down a path that everybody looks at later and says,
and it's okay to design forever as long as you're getting value from it every 2 weeks.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's the key. Yes, exactly. All right, your next chance to vote. Are we extending, no preference, or are we ending discussion on this topic? Who's on the fence? Oh, all right. 3 no preference, 3 end, 1 extend. I think we'll be done. All right. Good discussions on the topic. And I want to add one thing. So I'm going to extend for like 1 minute without officially extending it. I know, cheating. What you're going to find, Abe, is your designers start to use these techniques and the ceremonies, as Tom mentioned, as you build them a little at a time, you're going to find that they'll have a whole design approach, that these tasks, they're going to do the same ones for each project and each product that they're working on.
Yep.
And you're going to wind up with literally a deck of story cards that you're just going to be able to say, oh, we have a new project. Here's our first design activities that we
Yeah.
kick off every project with. And that just happens, that evolves, right?
And most of
From, like,
those
the
will be
first few.
ceremonies because they're going to be
Yes.
social activities.
Yeah. So
You gotta
there,
have a dozen of them.
it's, and I, being a project manager at Menlo, I saw that happen and wrote up that first set of standard designer stories. So it works. All right. Thanks, everyone. That was another really good topic. Good discussion. Next one. How to take minutes and meetings and notes effectively. Woohoo.
I took this one, I put in this one kind of as a joke, kind of seriously, but not. We're in meetings all the time, and it's very difficult to be typing notes and minutes while we're in these meetings / ceremonies. And there must be a better way to do this. What we started doing is started to record some of the meetings just because they're just all back to back, but then you have to go back and watch all the recordings. Is there a better way to take minutes here or notes in some of these ceremonies?
Yeah, use some of those free tools that take your recorded meetings and transcribe them. Have somebody else do it. Have a computer do it.
I love it. What's a free tool? Tell me one.
What was the name of that tool, Tom? We used one. Temi.
I don't know. I don't know what we used that
think.
was free, but a paid one is Otter AI.
Right. I think it's Temi.
It's worth
TEMI.
paying for it.
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
in general, it's like at the end of some of our meetings and ceremonies, we want to have some outcomes, like action items. And even when, like, if I'm hosting the meeting, I tend to also take notes at the same time, and that's a challenge. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out if
So
there's
the
better
point
than-
of the recording is so you have the context and the detail. The only thing you need to take notes on if you're doing the recording is specifically the decisions and the action items. And you read that back to the group as part of the ceremony, right? Okay, let me check. This is the decision that we made. And you read off what you wrote, make any edits to what people said. So you got the exact decision by consensus. And the same thing for the action items, right? So it's part of the meeting. That takes some of the stress off of you. But then the recording, if somebody says, oh, I don't remember what we talked about, which that can happen in the next hour with me, right? You go back to the recording and listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like that point, Mike. That's excellent. That's good basic project management thoughts, right? That as you're ending the meeting, someone, who may be designated as the scribe identifies what are the decisions we made, what are the action items, and to whom, right? If
Well, you do it as you go through, right? If it's a multi-topic meeting or there's multiple decisions, as soon as the group reaches a decision, you can do it then and share a screen even, right? Is this good? Fine, great. I got that one. And you go on to the next one, right? But just the decisions and the action items are the parts you need to go forward. And then the rest is backup for context. If somebody was asleep or playing on their phone or whatever.
Perfect. That's great. Sorry.
I voted for this because I think it's a perpetually interesting subject to hear how people do this. And one of the things that Helene and I did all the time when we were working together with coaching clients, including yourself, is like in our conversations with you, we had a shared Google document that we would both open while we're talking with you, and we would jointly take notes so that we have more than one brain taking notes, and she would type something and I would type something so that you can engage in the notes. Sometimes seeing how somebody else recorded a note during the conversation makes you go, well, that's not maybe what I heard, or that's a different spin, and allows you to even bring that forward into the conversation and surface it. And so as an analyst technique and as a coaching technique, I loved when she and I would share a Google Doc, and we had it the same place. So all of our notes for our conversations with Abe were all in one location, so that before we would talk with you, we would also look over the notes from the past conversation, the past months of conversation. So we're getting the fresh context, we're opening it up together, we're starting a new spot, and then we edit those notes together. And I love working that way with you, Helene. That was like a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
That's got a lot in common with mob programming.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it does. And Abe, and for anyone, tools like this one, Lean Coffee Table, we're using it for like this Lean Coffee format, but there's a piece of this that you can use just for regular meetings as well. You can say, hey, this is just a standard meeting. And note there's that whole actions and learning side. That can be part of the note taking. So it's a kind of a one-up from that joint Google Doc. It's a joint tool and we can all add to it. We can all add to these items on here. So again, it takes it away from any one person to be the scribe, the person in charge of notes. It becomes the team tool.
Nigel, you're going to add something?
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on Abe's point, I mean, I've done the same in steering groups where you've had to chair the meeting, you've had to sort of talk to the group, you've had to take notes. And I often find that the currency of the minutes has a value immediately, say, a week after the meeting, and then just in time before the next meeting that people read through the minutes, but they laser focus on what I've been actioned. So I'm now accountable. Have I actually done what needs to be achieved? And also often these are busy people. They don't have the time to read. So to a certain extent, having the action stroke decision items is more powerful. And it also then means that you're getting buy-in because they then have to listen again if they want to get the context behind what those action points are. Otherwise, you spend a lot of time typing out copious sort of updates and notes only for people to either, you know, not read them or casually read them during the meeting.
Excellent. All right, vote on our opportunity to vote. Should we extend the topic? No preference, or are we done?
Can we extend by 1 minute?
We sure can. I can extend by anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes. And do it legitimately instead of like I did last time.
If we do 1 minute, I'll vote a thumbs up.
So I
Just for your
see,
1 minute.
I'll do a 1 minute
one-
extension. All right, go.
At one specific thing that I wanted to get feedback on, which is the create action, add learning, like having structured notes could be a good way to approach things where you have like just things you observe, things that are actions, things that are kind of themes that you've found too. But if you have a structure, it could help. Any tools that might help with that? And we already mentioned the Lean Coffee, but it might seem like there could be other tools for that.
Someone must have created one.
I see a lot of templates like that in project management space, you know, to provide that, but that always feels paper heavy and structure heavy.
I like the idea of using that style of template, even though inside of a shared Google Doc, like doing
Yeah.
that extra step of putting those headers in.
All right, any other comments? Ready to end? Looks like. All right. Good notes. Good discussion. All of these have been really nice. Oh, red teaming. All right. What is? We had a little discussion early on. So red teaming. Nigel, is that you?
Well, red teaming actually came out of the American military following the 9/11. And it was all to do about sort of oversight in military planning and underestimating how enemies actually work. So the idea of the red team is to actually challenge everything. So everything you think is true, think is false, or if a plan has assumptions, what happens if those assumptions prove to be false or not as calculated as accurate, and what impact that can have on the plan. So the idea there is that you have inbuilt contingencies if a certain set of circumstances doesn't come to pass. And it also means that the red team don't necessarily have the same institutional biases that a team can actually have. And often when you're working on a project, the project team can what they call become pregnant with the project, because you're so excited and keen to get started on the project. You're not actually forecasting ahead of anticipating on some of the problems. So the red team have a set of tools and techniques, and one of the tools comes out of cognitive science is the use of pre-mortems. So the idea is that you say this project has failed. You don't say why or how it's failed, and then the team itself sets about ways of identifying how it's failed. And one of the examples they used was a nuclear power station. And out of the 12 recommendations, the one they didn't quite get right was to move the backup plant above sea level. So when the tsunami hit, it had a devastating effect. But that's an example of how I think the use of a pre-mortem in a team can be quite powerful. And also they have a tool or technique called everyone speaks once before someone speaks twice in a meeting. So it enables everybody in the room to have a voice, and it helps to balance the introvert extrovert. But it does put some checks and balances in along the way, and perhaps certain projects wouldn't be funded, or certain sprints may not come to pass, because through the red teaming, you have identified some fundamentals or assumptions that could lead to that project failing. And it also deals with lots of things like biases. So for example, in transport, people always overestimate the amount of use. They always underestimate the amount of cost. So these are all sort of biases and assumptions, and people will often not want to risk losing more so than actually winning on something. So it goes through all of those types of biases. So I just see there being a natural translation from military sort of red teaming into project management.
Yeah.
Reminds me a little bit of the 10th man, the concept that Israeli intelligence has, where if the first 9 people agree, it's the responsibility of the 10th to be the devil's advocate and have a different point of view.
Right.
But I just wonder across different sort of project teams whether there is that sort of visibility and transparency and objectivity.
So Nigel, when I think it was in the mid 90s when we splattered one of our space probes onto the surface of Mars, and then they tried to figure out what went wrong, and it's like 2 days later, the team's like, oh, they'd figured out that one team used one unit, another team used another unit, and I'm like, imagine if they'd have red teamed that on the flight over when they had 9 months and go, we just splattered on Mars. Why did it happen? Like, could they have found that by that type of analysis? When they found it so fast, I was literally like, oh, that means once you knew it crashed, you found this within 2 days. That would have been so I've had this thought for decades about things, but I've never heard it labeled that way. That's wonderful.
I really love that reference. And it's a lot of what you do in project management with risk management, right? Large projects, you'll start with that whole risk management approach of what are some of the early risks and what should we do? Oh, all right, time to vote. I'll keep talking while you vote. But this is right in line with that whole risk approach. And we've used that in many cases. I love that. Yeah, someone sharing this whole concept of red teaming. But we use that in project management for risk management and identifying the risks. But indeed, the biases are often too heavy for you to really think of the worst possible thing that could happen. So I love taking that to that next level and using those, that same reference of we're managing our risks, but we're really working hard on it to.
This is where optimism bias or hubris kicks in, that you can be overconfident because you succeeded in a project in the past doesn't necessarily translate that those skills will make this new project successful, because the dynamics have changed, given that we're living in a sort of VUCA world with lots of uncertainty and complexity. And I just think this introduces more realistic ceremonies and more checks and balances.
The
Yeah, yeah. I like the concepts. And one might talk about what kind of projects can you use that on? How large would they need to be to really get into spending the time doing the red teaming, right? One might argue anything that you're spending money on would get value from doing something like this, depending on the
How
scale.
many projects, for example, have ended with unintended consequences?
Right.
So therefore, the red team could potentially forecast or tease out what some of these unintended consequences could be, and ergo, you can plan around that. So are there certain things within your gift to mitigate that happening? Or if it were to happen, how would we control it? What would we do?
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Any other comments on red teaming? I gave it a
interesting
extra
subject.
minute. An extension. All right,
Move
well,
on.
I'll move that one over. Great discussion on red teaming. I liked it. A new word for our vocabularies. All right, this next one, in scale, and this will probably be our last topic. In scaled Scrum, how to balance between self-organization and stability of teams.
I put this one up. Let me clarify a little bit. In big room planning, you may have a whole lot of developers assign themselves to different things that are going to get developed, and you build a team around that, and away you go. Now, we're all familiar with teams needing to knit together and taking some time, usually a few sprints to do that. But in big room planning, you're trying to optimize the self-assignment of resources to things that need to get done.
Mhm.
So how do you balance between the self-organization in the big room and having teams that are stable, functioning, high performing, et cetera? It seems that these two things are at odds with each other. And has anyone thought about that, dealt with it, got ideas of how to optimize it?
So a clarification question, are you allowing teams to reform every PI every quarter or so?
That's the question, is what's the interval at which when should this happen?
Well, interesting. Okay.
It's kind of a dilemma in that if you're taking on a really, really big set of challenges, a big backlog, it's way too big for any one team. So you're going to have multiple teams. How do you initially form those teams? And then how often might you have teams regroup based on, oh, wait a minute, for that, we need these competencies within this team and so forth.
We had an idea for this. We had team ice cream on Friday, and walking back from that, an idea popped up of having teams within teams. So groups of 3 people that could move together onto another team to shift things around. So you have that cohesive of a small unit within the team and shifting that around as a group. And that's as far as the idea had gone, was just we could. And
yeah, you hear no sub teams, but in your case, that actually makes some sense to think of that. Mike's got his hand up.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. One is depends on the domain knowledge of whatever you're building, right? If, so that's going to be a key factor beyond the technology and how the teams work. I mean, I love all the team get together as an ice creams and culture building to make sure the team's on the same page. If, the trade-off is, the first thing that came to mind was why I asked the question, is that if you're going to allow self-assignment across the PI, not just within a team, right? Because normally a Scrum team, you'll self-assign work within that sprint. But if you're going to allow it across teams for the PI, however big your safe or scaled Scrum organization is, that requires reduction in team autonomy, meaning that the teams have to have some more similar ways of operating the way that they produce things and something else. Otherwise, your overhead is not just learning to get with the other people, right? It's not just the acculturation within the team, it's how each team operates. Because now if I go into every team and we have to reset up our operating procedures for that particular team every time, I'm injecting additional overhead. So you have to decide, are we going to have standardized documents? We're going to have standardized ceremonies across teams, all those sorts of things. It's not just the technology or getting along, it's also all that other stuff, right? It's the entire environment of a team.
Good point to think about.
Yeah,
And
you're not
that's
throwing
really
more
how we
bodies.
solved it. That's how we solved it at Menlo, where we had a bigger tribe. As Menlo, the tribe itself had a set of standard and expected ceremonies and behaviors for all tribe members. Teams could form on any given iteration, which is only week long, or break up. And teams that had to last, and we had teams that lasted, 6-7 years supporting some projects, teams that lasted long time or short time. If they had to last beyond a week-long iteration, we almost always moved one member off of every team onto another team to move, not to continually move just as a heartbeat of the organization, knowledge through the organization. But yeah, each team couldn't, to pull that off, each team doesn't get to decide every way about how they're going to behave. It's all ceremonially structured.
Yeah, the autonomy, and I forgot to use that term. The autonomy then is at a self-organization is mostly at the tribe level. You really can't do it at the team level because of just the drag. I mean, you still allow some, but there are limits.
Fun question.
Nigel had something I think he was going to say.
I was going to say
Vote
the
before
other
you
thing.
vote before you bring that up at Nigel level. Give it a duly allocated time. Would folks like to extend?
Give Nigel the last minute.
Yeah. All right. I'll give us 2 minutes. Just never know.
Have you thought about doing kind of like a skills audit mapping that will help the sort of motivation and drive CPD? So there could be somebody on a team who would love to work on that project, but you're not aware that they've got those skills. But at the same time, you don't want somebody to become demotivated because they've always got that SQL skill that everybody's looking for, and therefore they don't get the challenge. So it's a sort of softer way to identify the skill set and to get that happy blend so the team can really self-direct and normalize.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it is an
that's where the
interesting
pairing
thing
comes
between hiring the expert all the time and giving people an opportunity to learn something new or grow into something. So yeah, that's a tricky balance. Because the team might want to recruit the expert, but maybe they'd be better off recruiting somebody who's got lots of aptitude and has done some learning, but just hasn't had a chance to put it in practice. Maybe they're going to be even more motivated.
Well, you recruit both of them and pair them for the sprint and then
Hey, there's
go
a
the
good
other
one.
way.
That's really your best approach. Yeah. Do the pairing.
And sometimes
how
you do
people get to learn.
And sometimes you do hit things that you wouldn't have been able to figure out if you knew what you were doing, because if you knew what you were doing, you'd understand the constraints and not just ignore them. And why it didn't work the last time we tried it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I expected going into this, there's no perfect solution, but there's some really good ideas here to put into practice. And it's going to vary with every different situation.
Yeah, so I'll go back to your point about product versus project, right? Decide what your objective is in allowing tribe level autonomy, and mixing it up versus allowing team level, and then you can work the logistics and the structure around that. What are you trying to achieve?
Excellent. Excellent points all the way around. All right. Chance for folks to vote. Shall we keep talking? No preference?
We're out of time.
We're out of time. We're at 12:58. So I'm going to put a
out of time. Well,
really out of time. Our hour has
use the
gone.
atomic clock. Captain Marvel, that's your job. Come on.
Nigel. So.
But great discussions all the way through. So for folks, I think just about everyone here has attended these before, but I'll just say it again. I will be producing a summary of this. Collectively, we've been taking some notes using the tool, and we'll generate a PDF and send it out to everyone. And since we were recording this, we will also have a recording that you can go back to and for any future review. The beauty of the recording, yes, you can get it transcribed using tools to automatically transcribe it, but you can also fast forward through things on the recording. So you don't have to spend another hour listening to it again. You
Boy, I'm
can...
glad I didn't name names. I keep forgetting we're being recorded. I need a flashing light.
That's right. So this was great. We always collectively, we always get a lot out of these sessions. I know I do. So I appreciate everyone spending the time to join us. We've been more doing an every other month, if you've noticed. It's not been as monthly as we had originally scheduled these. So look for this. Where are we? August, October might likely be our next one. So keep
I
up
reserved
your
my calendar in
response.
October, so I know that we have it penciled in, so
Yeah.
Ford doesn't schedule over it.
We'll do our best to keep you available. But
All
we'll
right.
look forward to seeing everyone again in 2 months. So keep the faith,
Great.
keep your Scrum teams going. It was great to see everyone. Thank you for
Thanks,
spending
Lynn.
the time with us.
Bye.
Bye.